half. O'Reilly distributing the pass to support alongside of him McCarthy. O'Reilly. Fine sunny conditions, a temperature of about 70 degrees, a westerly, southwesterly to westerly breeze. Referee for the match is Keith Holman, as Langlands kicks over the 25. Collicoat, New Zealand fullback, caught immediately by the two Australian centres, Starling and Fulton. New Zealand just outside of their own 25. Gailey in centre field, and Greengrass in the dummy half position, but a penalty to Australia.
And New Zealand being penalised for not standing straight in the play of the ball. A man playing the ball must face straight up and down the field, and of course that New Zealand player did not. Australia getting an easy penalty to start with.
Now the kicker is Stewart, Wayne Stewart, the only Queenslander in the actual 13. Murphy, of course, is a reserve. And there's a surprise here because it was generally expected that Graham Langlands, who does most of the kicking for New South Wales and Australia, would take the kick. But Stewart has been given the kick right in front, playing in his first test match. The ball is set 30 yards out, about 32 yards out. Westerly breeze blowing across the line of flight. Crowd of about 22,000, a disappointing crowd for this second test. Stewart comes in for the kick and raised the flags. Australia 2, New Zealand 0 after 2 minutes of play.
And that gives Wayne Stewart a great start in his first international game. And it was interesting to notice that Wayne Stewart immediately ran in for that penalty. There was no doubt about it. It had been a preconceived business that Stewart was obviously to take the first kick.
New Zealand running from the southern end of the ground, kick out towards the terrace side of the field, well over the 25. Underneath it is Sullivan. Knocked on. The scrum is only 18 yards out from the Australian line. New Zealand ball, it's Dowsett, Williams. And so the New Zealand 5/8 will play it back 18 yards out from the Australian line with Paul, the replacement for Orchard. Penalty New Zealand.
And the Australian players being penalised, especially the 5/8 pickup for being well within the 5 yards. New Zealand pack is very heavy. They completely moved Australia in that actual scrum. They are about 4 pounds heavier per man, this New Zealand team.
And so the kick right in front, 24 yards out, with the breeze partly behind the line of flight, but mainly blowing across the line. Australia leading 2-0, only 3 minutes of play in the first half. Collicoat, the kicker, kicks with the side of his right boot. And raised the flags, it's 2-2.
And a good start to New Zealand as well. Collicoat, quite an unusual kicker, a former soccer player, kicks with the side of his foot.
Australia won the toss and are defending the northern end of the ground, which is the scoreboard end at Lang Park, in this the first half. Kick-off, Rodonicus, the halfway. Collicoat. Still inside the New Zealand 25 at Greengrass. Big, strong second row forward. That's Fisher, the hooker, number 9. And kicking for touch on the terrace side of the field, but it's out on the full.
New Zealand players hurried into taking that actual kick, and it is a little bit unusual to see 4 tackles, but of course international rules state that it is still a 4-tackle rule, and that is what they're playing today.
To Williams. Both Australian, the centres moving up very quickly, with pickup also in there quickly for the tackle. This is Christian. On the New Zealand 25, to Dowsett, back inside to Paul, it appeared to be. The knock on to be played. Pretty close to centre field. Dowsett's ball into the scrum, and Langland's. So Australia in a strong attacking position on the 25 as it's Sullivan, Walters, dummy half, Rodonicus, pick up, and that's Starling.
And Starling losing the ball in the tackle there, and referee Holman awarding or saying that it was a knock-on and will play the scrum.
Very strong westerly wind blowing at this moment on the New Zealand 25, and it's the halfback Dowsett. Gailey. And Krilitic swinging it back inside to Greengrass. 12 yards short of the halfway mark, and it's kicked well out towards the terrace side. Will it run into touch? Ambram into touch.
A hard one for Ambram to take there. It was a kick which New Zealand took. They didn't have much time, and it bounced awkwardly for Ambram, and he would have done very, very well if he'd have been able to take it.
Scrums favouring New Zealand, rather surprisingly, 3-1. Australian ball, pick up, Ambram. Tackler was Williams. Still in Australian territory, Beatson. Rodonicus. Chance for Australia with pick up over the 20. Lock forward Sullivan, rather. Looking for support now. Alford's over the line.
And that's a great try by Alford, but the whole thing started with Beatson. Beatson breaking away from tackle, standing in a tackle, slipping the ball back to Rodonicus, and Rodonicus once again breaking through 3 or 4 tackles before he got this ball onto support Alford, who was able to break out of, once again, a feeble New Zealand tackle.
And here it is again on action replay. Chance for Australia with pick up over the 20. Lock forward Sullivan, rather. Looking for support down. Alford's over the line. Stewart attempting the conversion from inside the 25, about 22 yards out, and 17 or 18 yards in from touch on the terraced side, and he'll be kicking into this westerly breeze. Not so very far out, but he'll need plenty of power in the kick. Wind increasing in tempo as Stewart measures his steps back. And it's there. New Zealand tacklers flying in there to wrap up the Australian with one of the tacklers, Krilitic, and O'Reilly, short passing, Beatson, Sullivan. McCarthy, long pass, Stewart couldn't get to it, and it's into touch.
The Australian forwards are combining well. 3 little passes there to send Sullivan away. Scrum just inside the New Zealand 25 on the grandstand side of the field. Scrums favouring New Zealand, 5-all the scrums. Australia leading 7-2, 15 minutes of play. Dowsett's ball in. Australian ball to pick up. Intercepted. Offside. Well, I'm afraid I can't really see that as far as the New Zealanders were concerned. It was very slow coming out of the actual scrum, and it was the lock, Krilitic, who came around very quickly, and as Rodonicus passed, it slipped in between the 5/8 and the halfback to pick up the intercept. But still, referee Holman has awarded a penalty and another chance for Wayne Stewart.
Stewart to set this one on the 25, and it's about 12 12 to 14 yards in from touch on the grandstand side of the field, so he'll have the assistance of the breeze for this kick. He's kicked 2 out of 2 so far, and Australia has a lead of 7 points to 2. And the try of the match was scored by Elford in the 7th minute. Stewart attempting his third kick. And again, a 100% record. Australia go to a lead of 9 points to 2 after 16 minutes of play.
And this is a great international debut for Wayne Stewart, the Queensland winger, kicking 3 out of 3. They've been fairly simple kicks as far as distance from the post, but there's a very strong wind blowing across, and something which he has had to allow for on all 3 kicks.
Kicked out to the terrace side of the field again with the breeze. McCarthy. One of the tacklers was Gailey, the front row forward wearing number 10 for New Zealand, who numbered the forwards the opposite way to the Australian team. Riley. Beatson back to pick up. I called it O'Reilly instead of O'Reilly a moment ago, and now this long pass out to McCarthy. Ambram, meant for him, into touch.
And there it was once again, McCarthy standing on the blind.
Dowsett. The scrum was only 35 yards out from the New Zealand line, 10 yards in from touch, and it's Orchard knocks on. Australian ball to pick up. O'Reilly. Walters to Rudonicus and Beatson. After all that, Sullivan. "35 yards out from the New Zealand line. Beatson over the 25. Third tackle. Playing under the international rule, 4-tackle rule. Walters, O'Reilly, pick up. Rudonicus. And crunch from his opposite number, but the tackler coming through very quickly was Williams. In centre field, 28 yards out from the New Zealand line. Australian ball. Rudonicus over the 25. Away it goes to Fulton. Fulton racing for the line.
And once again, this New Zealand pitiful defence has led to Rudonicus slipping through there. He had plenty of room to move, but I thought he had to pass to supports, but he broke out of 2 or 3 tackles, and of course he found the ever-present Fulton there, and it wasn't even really any need for him to pass to Fulton because he had broken the tackles completely.
And here it is again on action replay. In centre field, 28 yards out from the New Zealand line. Australian ball. Rudonicus over the 25. Away it goes to Fulton. Fulton racing for the line. And so after 20 minutes of play, Australia lead by 12 points to 2 with Wayne Stewart attempting his 4th kick. He's kicked 3 out of 3 so far. This one's just in from the 25 and about 15 or 16 yards in from touch. Kicking into the breeze again. And waved away, just away to that left of the left-hand upright.
And New Zealand is quickly losing any chance that they have in this test match, and they're only doing it themselves. It's just this pitiful tackling, which they're missing important tackles and allowing Australian players to slip through. Australia certainly haven't played brilliantly as far as attack is concerned, but just these breaks which they've been able to set up.
Over the 25, Langlands. Rodonicus, O'Reilly. Inside to Sulla McCarthy. New Zealand ball. It was Fisher, the hooker, who sent the pass away, and it's Williams. Williams this time following through on the little kick. Ambram over the top, the knock-on to be played. Close to the Australian 25, about 10 yards in from touch on the terrace side of the field. Australia leading 12-2. Williams, Christian. Pass to Orchard into touch.
And that pass explained itself. It was just a desperation pass by Christian. Actually, his fullback was coming up on the outside of him. If he could have got the pass away, it would have been a good move. But Christian just a little bit lost and sending that stupid pass right out to his winger. The Australian players being penalised for not packing straight in the front row.
Penalty, 30 yards out from the Australian line and about 12 yards in from touch. And Krilitic kicks for touch. It's only about 12 yards now from the Australian line for the second kick. Orchard to Krilitic, back to Orchard. Dowsett in the dummy half position to Gailey. And Gailey bursting through Eade. First try to New Zealand.
Well, that was a good try by New Zealand because they worked a little switch move. One player going one way off a player who was holding the ball, another going the other way. And then, of course, Eade coming with a burst and with plenty of power able to crash over in the tackle for a good try by New Zealand. And this might bring them back into it.
Here it is again on action replay. It's only about 12 yards now from the Australian line for the second kick. Orchard to Krilitic, back to Orchard. Dowsett in the dummy half position to Gailey. And Gailey bursting through Eade. First try to New Zealand. Australia leading 12-5, having scored 2 tries to 1. About 23 minutes of play in the first half as Collicoat raises the flags.
And that kicker was very obvious, the way that Collicoat runs into the ball soccer-wise from the side and kicks it with the side of his foot.
So that closes the scores up quite a bit, with Australia leading New Zealand by 12 points to 7. First scorers in the match, 2 for Australia and 1 for New Zealand. Looking at the scrums favour Australia now by 8 to 7. Rodonicus, Collicoat, he'll play the ball 20 yards out from his own line. Krilitic. Walters, one of the tacklers of Krilitic, the hooker. Fisher, limping as he started his run then. He's had some ankle trouble and he was in some doubt at one stage of this week. That's Gailey, the prop forward. Dowsett. And Krilitic turning the pass away to Williams. Now Paul, front row forward, playing a number 8 jersey. Only 12 yards short of the halfway mark, still in New Zealand territory. And Greengrass. Third tackle. Krilitic kicking over on the grandstand side. Stewart underneath it on his own 25. Rodonicus, pick up. And this scrum will pack down midway between New Zealand 25 and the halfway mark. right in centre field. Dowsett's ball in. Australian ball, pick up. It's Fulton. Knocked over after he kicked the ball. Colourcoat, tackled by Ambram, flying through, only 2 yards out from the New Zealand line. O'Sullivan. Orchard overrunning it, and it's O'Reilly's ball. Inside the New Zealand 25, Ambram distributes then to the lock forward Sullivan, Radonicus. That's McCarthy. Further out is the pickup, and now Starling over the 25, Starling, and racing for the corner. Over goes Starling.
That was a good piece of work there by Starling, in which he showed his speed. He couldn't get the ball out to Stewart, but the man who must be commended was pick up the 5'8", but somehow, some way, he slipped that ball out as he was going down in that actual tackle, and out to Starling, and Starling using his speed.
Let's see it again on action replay. Colourcoat, tackled by Ambram, flying through, only 2 yards out from the New Zealand line. O'Sullivan. Orchard overrunning it, and it's O'Reilly's ball. Inside the New Zealand 25, Ambram distributes then to the lock forward Sullivan, Radonicus. That's McCarthy. Further out is the pickup, and now Starling over the 25, Starling, and racing for the corner. Over goes Starling. Australia leading 15-7, having scored 3 tries to 1, and it's Stewart attempting the conversion from the grandstand side of the field, 28 yards out and very close to the touchline. But this time the breeze will be behind him. Waved away. Stewart has now kicked 3 out of 5. He kicked the first 3 and has missed the last 2, but that one was certainly a difficult kick. Colourcoat has kicked 2 out of 2, the New Zealand fullback. So it's Dowsett to place it on the halfway mark. McCarthy. Fulton in the dummy half position. Tries to get away from Christian. Inside the New Zealand 25 to pick up O'Reilly and McCarthy. Not quite into touch, only about 12 yards out from the line. The third tackle indicated. Radonicus, pick up. Into the goal mouth. Colourcoat forces the ball.
Quite a good kick there by Pickup, because the New Zealand centres, I'm sure they were offside in front of the post, but they moved up very, very quickly, and there was no way that he could have got the ball out to winger Ambram right out here.
And it's Colourcoat, 10 yards short of the halfway mark. Langlands over the 25, or up to the 25. One of the tacklers is Fisher, the hooker. In centre field, Walters, O'Reilly, and that's Elford. Elford through again for his second try.
Well, it was good work by Elford, mainly because he burst onto the ball, and he burst onto the ball strongly. And O'Reilly, once again, who stood in the tackle and slipped it away. But once again, there were 3 pitiful tackles by the New Zealand players, and the fullback Colourcoat hardly touched Elford as he ran straight past him. He had plenty of time.
Here it is again on action replay. Langlands over the 25, or up to the 25. One of the tacklers is Fisher, the hooker. In centre field, Walters, O'Reilly, and that's Elford. Elford through again for his second try. Australia leading 18-7, scored 4 tries to 1. Half-time coming up in about 2 minutes. Wayne Stewart attempting the conversion. It's only about 7 or 8 yards or centre. About 15 yards out. Stewart has kicked 3 out of 5. 1 flag up and 1 down. The referee said yes. So that's 4 out of 6 to Wayne Stewart.
That was an important kick for Wayne Stewart, because I feel if he'd have missed that, it would have been Langlands who would have come back to kick once again. That is if Langlands returns in the second half.
So it's Collicoat setting the ball on the halfway mark. Australia leading by 20 points to 7. McCarthy. Rodonicus. Walters. O'Reilly. Taking a lot to stop these Australian forwards. New Zealand have to tackle better in the second half. They could really run right as it switched back to Starling. Third tackle. Walters. And that's Fulton. Half-time hooter sounding. Pressure on Collicoat. And that's all for this half, with Australia leading New Zealand by 20 points to 7, scoring 4 tries to 1.
Unbelievable stuff!
Up to the 25, Australia leading by 20 points to 7 on the New Zealand 25, and it's a penalty New Zealand.
Australian players immediately being penalised for being within the 5 yards and the play the ball.
Beatson was well and truly up inside the 5 yards, and it's Kriletich who finds touch on the grandstand side of the field, about 5 or 6 yards inside Australian territory. Kriletich, and nearly put to ground by Gailey. Kriletich distributing the pass to Dowsett. And Dowsett to play it back 15 yards out as Fisher distributes the pass, and Kriletich, Christian, and O'Sullivan, the centre, bowled over just as he kicked the ball.
Well, I certainly don't know why O'Sullivan passed that ball. At least he was in the open. All he had to do was run, and he had supports, especially his winger, who was coming as well. And he's gained about 15 to 20 yards with that kick and lost the advantage of possibly scoring a try.
And O'Sullivan was injured in that tackle. Just as he kicked the ball, it was probably a photo finish. It was very close. Elford was the tackler, that hard tackling second row forward. Play has been in progress for 18 minutes in the second half. Australian tries, 2 to Elford, 1 each to Fulton and Starling. New Zealand tries scored by Eade. Scrums favour Australia by 15 to 10. The penalties favour New Zealand 10-8. No points scored in the second half. The main curtain raiser, Group 18 of New South Wales, defeated Lower Wide Bay 23 points to 16. Took a pretty nasty bump, O'Sullivan, but he's okay again, and the scrum will pack down close to the halfway mark, 10 yards in from touch on the terrace side. Australian ball, Rodonicus, tackler Kriletich, Sullivan, Beatson, Sullivan, New Zealand ball, Dowsett, and Murphy was the tackler, number 15, the Queensland second row forward, who replaced McCarthy, and that's Paul. Tackler was Rodonicus, still in New Zealand territory as Gailey. Back to Christian. Penalty, Australia.
Well, it's a little bit hard to work out there. Actually, he's penalising the New Zealand players for trying to rake the ball out of that actual play the ball. It wasn't a play the ball. The man was held, and he's ruling, Holman, that someone scraped the ball back, trying to get it back to his supports.
And the penalty takes play up to the New Zealand 25, where Rodonicus has Walters in position. Rodonicus, O'Reilly switching it back to Fulton. Langland's coming through too at a great bat, but Fulton caught nearly into touch, 10 yards out. Murphy. Walters distributes to Beatson. Short passing. Eade tries to pick up. New Zealand ball, half-back Dowsett. 20 yards out from the New Zealand line. Still no points scored in the second half as the Williams sends it to Collicote. That's the Australian ball knocked on.
And there's certainly been some very, very untidy football in this second half. The first half didn't produce any real brilliant football, and once again in this second half we see neither side really running onto the ball strongly.
20 minutes of play remaining, Australia leading 20 points to 7. Crowd of about 22,000 here. Disappointing crowd for the second test pickup. Krilitic wrapped him up. Rodinicus, dummy half position. And just about through. Rodinicus is over.
Well, once again, it's just very, very bad defence by New Zealand, because Rodinicus picked up that ball and he went right down the centre, and I doubt whether one of the New Zealand players were within 1 yard of him, and of course he certainly wasn't even missed by a tackle. They just weren't there at all. Bad work by the forwards, and of course bad work also by the fullback and by the halfback.
Here it is again on action replay. Crowd of about 22,000 here. Disappointing crowd for the second test pickup. Krilitic wrapped him up. Rodinicus, dummy half position. And just about through. Rodinicus is over. Australia leading 23-7 with Wayne Stewart attempting this one right in front. And raises the flags, giving him 5 out of 7. Australia 25, New Zealand 7. Australia have now scored 5 tries to 1. Collicote. Over the 25, Sullivan. Walters, O'Reilly. Beatson. One of the tacklers is Eade, number 11. Just short of the halfway mark, Rodinicus. Langlands. Fourth tackle on the halfway mark, and there's a little bit of sand in the centre of Lang Park. Most of the grass worn out in that centre patch.
Goodwin, number 14, replaced George.
Greengrass is the injured New Zealand player, and there's a replacement coming onto the field. George Ambram has been replaced in the Australian side by Goodwin, the fullback. Well, normally a fullback, but certainly a versatile player, Ted Goodwin, the country player from New South Wales who switched to St George.
It's going to be interesting from now on just to see whether New Zealand can hold out, whether they can tackle and keep Australia from scoring. Australia's starting to fall apart a little bit now as far as their combination. They're starting to run individually, but of course if big men like Beatson are allowed to run like this, and O'Reilly, Australia possibly will have a picnic.
Sullivan. Only 5 points scored in the second half. Scored a few moments ago. As O'Reilly. And New Zealand ball, that's Christian. Into touch, close to the halfway mark in front of the grandstand. Scrums favour Australia by 18-10. Certainly getting much more ball in the second half. Australia only 11-8 in scrums at half-time. It's a penalty to New Zealand.
And the Australian forwards being penalised because they didn't pack the scrum straight and moved over towards the sideline, and referee Holman moving back into where it should have been.
Krilitic. Second half scrums favour Australia 7-2. Penalties favour New Zealand overall by 12-9. Orchard. Krilitic. Paul, rather gaily, over the 25, back inside. Greengrass just couldn't gather it. Beatson there too. Australian ball, Langlands. Tackler Krilitic. Close to the Australian line, only inches out from the Australian line. There's Goodwin in number 14 jersey, who replaced Ambram a few moments ago. Walters, dummy half. Beatson. And that's Rodonicus back into Walters. New Zealand ball. Fisher and Collicote. Tackled by Starling. Brereton, dummy half, and that's Gailey. Paul. Williams. The bounce favouring Williams, or it did appear to for a moment, but it's a New Zealand ball with another player racing through to pick it up, completely obscured. Williams in the dummy half position, tries to crash over, and Williams is nearly over but can't get the ball down. And Paul. Greengrass. It's Eade who will play it back. Fisher. And now Christian. Fisher. Bad luck, there was no one there. Just at that vital moment, Fisher looking to pass the ball.
And just a bit unfortunate there for New Zealand. I'll give Williams his due. He's tried everything. In the first half, he tried the little kick when his centres were marked well by the Australians. And once again there, that little kick nearly favoured him. He nearly picked it up with his outstretched left hand. And, of course, his support coming through was just unable to go over the line. But good work, Williams, because he's starting to try things. And this is something we haven't seen the New Zealand team do.
Injured player is Krilitic. 15 minutes of play remaining. Australia leading 25-7. Australia dominating second half scrums, 8-2. Half-time score of 20 points to 7. Australia now lead 25-7. Only 5 points scored in the second half. About 8 yards out from the Australian line. Rodonicus to put the ball in. New Zealand ball, Dowsett, caught by Sullivan, the Australian lock, 2 yards out. Now it's switched across to Fisher. It's a loose ball. Stewart can't pick it up, gathered then by Collicote or Collicote. Knock on. Another scrum to Australia. Sullivan, Beatson, Sullivan, and pick up. Fulton. Orchard trailing him over the halfway mark. Beats that tackler over the 25. A great run from Fulton. He's going to score in the corner as he's trailed through.
Well, that was quite an amazing try to the Australian players. Actually, the pass to Fulton looked as though it had gone forward, but actually what it did was touch the New Zealand player's hand. And, of course, that put it back onside as far as Fulton was concerned. And Fulton racing down that sideline. He was certainly picked up by Orchard, but stepping back inside and getting out of the tackle to go over in the corner.
Here it is again on action replay. Another scrum to Australia. Sullivan, Beatson, Sullivan, and pick up. Fulton. Orchard trailing him over the halfway mark. Beats that tackler over the 25. A great run from Fulton. He's going to score in the corner as he's trailed through. And with 13 minutes of play remaining, Australia go to a lead of 28 points to 7. A difficult conversion for Wayne Stewart from right out on the touchline, 26 yards out, and kicking from the most difficult part in the ground, right in front of the grandstand, where the ground itself seems to dip away slightly onto the athletics track, so it's something of an uphill run for the kicker, kicking from that part of the ground in front of the grandstand on the 25. That's Fulton's second try, and Australia have scored 6 tries to 1. It's waved away. 5 out of 8 to Stewart in the kicking department.
Well, there's no doubt about the Australian team. They have this individual brilliance, which we haven't seen in the New Zealand team. And there, Fulton being able to pick up that ball and race right downfield. If New Zealand have had players of this calibre, they haven't played well as a combination, but they just haven't had that little bit of zip and a little bit of individual brilliance, which the Australian players have been able to produce.
And Colacote kicks off 15 yards inside, knocked on by Murphy. Murphy came on as a replacement, replacing McCarthy. "12 minutes of play remaining. Another Australian ball. Rodonicus. Pick up. Knock on. And this scrum will form closer to centre field, not so very far from centre field, 30 yards out from the Australian line. Dowsett, Williams. Australians standing well up. Langland's dropping back. "10 yards out from the Australian line with Elford. And that's O'Reilly to Beatson. Goodwin back inside, backing up very well was Elford. And now to pick up, or Goodwin it was, coming back into the movement again from that left wing. 10 yards inside New Zealand territory. Pick up. Referee plays the knock on right on the halfway mark in centre field.
And Tim Pickup having a bad second half as far as catching the ball. What a great game second rower Elford has had. We've seen him here as a great tackler, a great defensive man, but he's had a brilliant game in attack today, breaking through continually and backing up the man with the ball.
Penalty New Zealand.
And once again, Walters being penalised for having his foot across the mouth of the scrum. Of course, until the ball goes in past the two prop forwards' feet, the two hookers cannot move their foot out.
Australia leading 28-7 with 10 minutes of play remaining. Krilitic to take the penalty kick. Didn't find the line. Goodwin. Centre field, 12 yards short of the halfway mark. Australia in possession. That's O'Reilly. Walters, Rodonicus and Sullivan managed to get the pass back, did very well to Murphy. And Australia still moving the ball with Rodonicus over the halfway mark to pick up. Another loose ball, some pretty jolting tackles and a knock-on to be played.
Once again, Tim Pickup losing that ball on the tackle. He just can't do a thing right.
Quickly. All over the fence, please. All around the ground.
Injured player leaving the field. Going to the sideline is Krilitic. If he's leaving the field, yes, Krilitic appears to be leaving the field. Being replaced by number 14, it appears to be. We'll have a better look at him later. This is Dowsett. It's Dick Bolton, number 14, replacing Krilitic.
Still a man on the ground on the terrace side. Over the fence.
On the halfway mark, gathered by Paul.
Glad near the Toyota, near the scoreboard. Same colour and red. Over the fence, please.
Williams to play it back for New Zealand. That's Bolton, the new player onto the field with Greengrass to play it back on the halfway mark. Gailey kicks on the grandstand side. Langlands takes it, and he's 25. And a good tackle from Eade, or Greengrass it was, coming across. O'Reilly out wide to pick up. Williams over the top. Rodonicus. That's Walters. Beatson. O'Reilly. Penalty, New Zealand.
Yes, it was Walters who actually touched the ball. Walters touching it with his knee. Beatson trying to stand once again in the tackle and slip the ball away to supports. And, of course, the ball coming forward and Walters being well offside and had to be a penalty to New Zealand. What will they do? I should think they'd kick for the sideline just at present and try and score these 5 points.
And it's Christian who kicks for the touch. And Stewart takes it and knocks it on.
Well, the New Zealand kicking for the sideline has been very poor. In this second half, in the first half especially, they kicked badly for the sideline, gaining sometimes only 10 yards. The second half, they started off well, but twice just recently we've seen the ball not even go out over the sideline.
It's only 8 yards out from the Australian line. Scrums favouring Australia 20-13. Australian ball 21-13. That's Sullivan, the lock. 10 yards out from the Australian line. O'Reilly, Beatson, back to Rodonicus on the 25. Australia leading 28-7 with about 7 minutes of play remaining, as Langlands kicks well downfield. It's a good kick and running into touch. 12 yards inside New Zealand territory on the terraced side. Australia have scored 6 tries to 1. Another Australian ball, is it? Yes. Pick up. Caught by Bolton, the replacement lock for Krilitic. Sullivan. Straight through. How was that? Over the 25 and caught by Brereton coming in from the left wing. Walters, Rodonicus, pick up. They're all outside of him too, including O'Reilly, and Langlands was up into the movement. Walters, O'Reilly this time, and that's Fulton to Starling, and Starling races for the corner, the 7th try.
Well, that try should have come a few seconds earlier when Pickup came back inside with men right outside of him. All he had to do was pass the ball out, but still that actual try was good work by Starling. And watch how a man running onto the ball and running onto the ball strongly quickly breaks a line for Starling to go across in the corner.
Here it is again on action replay. Walters, Rodonicus, Pickup. They're all outside of him too, including O'Reilly, and Langlands was up into the movement. Walters, O'Reilly this time, and that's Fulton to Starling, and Starling races for the corner, the 7th try. Australia leading New Zealand by 31 points to 7 with 5 minutes of play remaining. Australia have scored 7 tries to 1. That was Starling's second try. Elford has scored 2, Fulton 2, and the other one was scored by Rodonicus. Stewart attempting the conversion. 5 yards in from touch from this difficult position again in front of the stand outside the 25, but this is a better attempt. Waved away. The Stewart's record is 5 out of 9.
Australia 31, New Zealand 7.
Collicoat. Murphy. And with 5 minutes of play remaining, quite a few of this 22,000 crowd leaving the ground. Rodonicus, pick up. 10 yards short of the halfway mark. Referee playing the knock-on. Been a disappointing match, this second test at Lang Park, certainly a lacklustre test match. Scrum is 12 yards inside Australian territory, not far from centre field. Australian ball, Rodonicus. Halfway mark, that's Fulton. Starling. And Starling's forward pass ruled. I don't think it was myself.
Well, it was very, very doubtful one. Actually, referee Holman wasn't actually in line with that ball. It was a desperation pass by Fulton. Fulton passing it out, bouncing before it got to Starling, but it certainly bounced straight to Starling. It was a split decision. Starling was away. No way in the wide world he would have been stopped, and even if someone had to come across and cover the fence, Stewart was there in support.
right on the halfway mark in centre field. New Zealand ball. Dowsett. That's the new player onto the ground, O'Sullivan. Over Brereton's head and into touch. 31-7 in favour of Australia. 3 minutes of play remaining. The scrums favouring Australia by 23 to 14. The penalties favour New Zealand 14-9. Australian ball again to pick up. Starling. O'Sullivan, the tackler. Pick up, dummy half. Sullivan, the Australian lock, and that's Murphy. Right on the halfway mark, Rodonicus, Beatson, Elford, and Langlands. Into touch. Langlands not very happy about being dragged into touch by O'Sullivan. There's plenty of punches going in. The Brereton can throw a few. And Beatson comes in and had quite a piece of Eade. And now O'Reilly and Gailey are having a good set too. Well, that all started with O'Sullivan's tackle of Langlands, dragging him into touch.
Certainly quite a bad incident there, actually. There was only 2 players involved, and of course everyone came from everyone. You could see Beatson running across, you could see O'Reilly running across. Fair enough, I suppose, when players are in there and your own mates are in there, you come to support, but everyone came in swinging punches. Could have been quite a nasty incident. Actually, it was a nasty incident as far as something which happened and so very, very close to the crowd as it was.
Well, the game's nearly over too. Only about 2 minutes remaining. Australia leading 31-7. They scored 7 tries to 1. 2 each to Elford, Fulton and Starling, and the other one to Rodonicus. Eade scored the try for New Zealand. And an injured player is O'Sullivan, who was involved in the original incident with Langlands. Scrums favouring Australia 24-14. The penalties favour New Zealand 14-9. At half-time it was 20-7 in favour of Australia. Australia now lead 31-7. Scrum just outside of the New Zealand 25. Australian scrum pick up. And racing through Starling, and Fulton was knocked over by Christian before he could get there, but Starling's there, and so too is Goodwin, who replaced Ambram. New Zealand ball, that's Collicoat, the full-back. Goodwin's in for the tackle, number 14, and he's into touch.
Well, that was a ridiculous piece of work by captain for New Zealand, Christian, because all he did was put his hand out and stop Fulton as Fulton was going through for it, and Fulton was at least 15 to 20 yards away from the ball.
Just outside of the New Zealand line, Christian. Was Christian for a moment. Sullivan. Australia in possession. And the knock-on to be played. Just a case of playing out the time now with only a few seconds remaining. And there's the full-time hooter. Australian ball to pick up Starling. And the crowd starting to run onto the field. Referee blows his whistle, it's all over. Australia has won the second Rugby League Test at Lang Park, defeating New Zealand by 31 points to 7, scoring 7 tries to 1. The penalties favoured Australia by, well, rather the scrums favoured Australia by 26 to 15, 26 to 15, and the penalties favoured New Zealand 14-9. Australia won the match 31-7.